Hi, this is Danielle, and I'm going to be walking you through the roller coaster task. This task asks students to investigate how fast roller coasters tend to be. There were three standards that I identified within the sixth grade curriculum that I felt that this task specifically addressed. The first one is asking students to recognize a statistical question as one that anticipates variability in the data. So the question, how fast roller coasters tend to be, implies that there is variability within the data set because there is not just one prediction that we can have for the speed of roller coasters. Already we're starting to anticipate that variability. Also, the different questions that students walk through address the center of the data set. So when we're looking at the top speed, what would the top speed be for a newer roller coaster or an older roller coaster? So we're looking at those measures of center, whether that be mean or median, and then also considering the variability. So we're describing the data set, which is SP5, and then we are understanding that within that description there is variability, which is SP number 3, understanding that a measure of center and a description of variability should both be considered when we're describing what the data set looks like. So the first question asks us, are there any differences between the top speed of older, newer, and more recent roller coasters? I'm going to take top speed as the variable and drag that to the x-axis, and then I'm going to sort it by age group along the y-axis. Already we can see within this representation that the data is spread out differently for the three different age groups. But to make that even more clear, we can show the mean and median of each cluster. And you can see that the mean and median for the older coasters would be around 50. The mean and median for the more recent coasters is somewhere between 56 and 58 miles per hour. And the newest coasters tend to be even faster, with the mean and median both being around 65, 66 miles per hour. So here we can see that the top speeds of the newest coasters tend to be faster than the top speeds of the more recent or the older coasters. However, that's not true for every coaster. You can see there's some of the newest coasters are slower than some of the more recent or older coasters. But what we're describing is the general trend, that the tendency is for the newer coasters to be faster. You can also see that the data is clustered around the mean and the median for each one of these data sets. However, there are some points on the more extreme ends in each case. And this seems reasonable given what we know about more recent technology, that as coasters are built in more recent years, they would have the capability to go faster and faster. The next question asks us to consider whether the type of material makes a difference in speed. So I'm going to remove age group as a variable and instead put the type of coaster on the y-axis. So now we're organizing the data set according to whether the coasters are wooden or steel. We can see that the mean and median speeds for wooden coasters tend to be around 54.5, 55 miles per hour. And then the top speeds for the steel coasters tend to be greater than that, right around 60, 61 miles per hour. So in general, steel coasters tend to be faster. The last question asks us, if we were going to ride a roller coaster built before 1980, what would you expect for a typical top speed? So in order to address this, I'm going to take type off as a variable. And I'm going to organize my data hierarchically. Sorry about that. Hierarchically according to age group. Because I only want to look at the coasters built before 1980, I'm going to hide the newer and more recent coasters so that I'm only looking at the older coasters. And now I can see that the typical speeds for these coasters are between or right around 50 miles per hour. So if I was going to ride a coaster built before 1980, that would be what I would expect the speed to be, because that's what those coasters tended to have their top speed at. I can see that the data is skewed a little bit to the left with these last two coasters, but in general, it's mostly a symmetrical data set clustered around the mean and the median. So for coasters built after 1980, I'm going to actually do the opposite. I'm going to restore all of the other cases and now just hide the older coasters, those ones that were built before 1980. So now I'm just looking at the coasters built after 1980, and I can see that the mean and median of those coasters tends to be around 61 miles per hour. So we can see that those coasters tended to be faster than the older ones. And again, we have maybe one outlier. We can check and see if it's an outlier by applying a box plot. And nope, that still falls within the top 25% of the data set, but most of the data set is clustered around the middle, making it a symmetrical data set. The next part of this investigation asks us to add a new case in our data set. So I'm going to go back and restore all of the cases and add in a new coaster. I'm going to put this back within our data set and then add a new case. So this new case is the extreme coaster in the Blue Bayou Park. It would fall under the most recent category, the newest category, because it was built in 2007. It's found in Baton Rouge in Louisiana. It's a steel coaster, sit-down design. As I said, opened in 2007. The top speed is 37 miles per hour. The maximum height is 51 feet. No information provided about the drop. The length is 1,391 feet. Duration is 86 seconds. There are no inversions and no information provided about latitude or longitude. The last question asks us how well our new case fits within the data set. And already I'm starting to think that it's going to be a little different than what we would have predicted, because I can see that the top speed, if I scroll over, is 37 miles per hour, which is not what we would have expected for a more recent coaster. However, I can show that by reapplying this graph. So let me make sure that this applies to all of our conditions. Yep, so this is now including all of the cases. You can see we have the box plot up there plus the mean and median. Now if I select extreme, you can see that it falls right here in the lowest 25% of the data set, which means that it is not close to the measures of central tendency. But it's still within the range. It's not an outlier. And so while we might notice that it doesn't really match the claims that it's close to the mean and median of about 60 miles per hour, or 55, between 56 and 59, now that we included our older coasters as well, it doesn't really fit within that top speed. However, we're not going to change our claims because it is still within that data set, and we obviously are recognizing that there's variability within this data set. And even if I went through and hid the older coasters so that we're only looking at the most recent, the newest coasters, the ones built after 1980, we can still see that extreme is within that quartile.